Orc children have pets more fearsome than you.
We are not trying to be fearsome, Brona.
More like World of Warcraft, am I right?
That's going to be the first line of the episode. My name is George, and with me is Chris, and today we are looking at Warcraft from 2016. And the reason we're doing this right now is because I think by the time this go out, 48 hours later, Blizzard is going to announce the next expansion, and we are totally not going to leech off of that news cycle.
So what are they announcing? I never even listened to you when you. It's a it's a new expansion for WoW or what?
Oh, that's good. That's a good start. No, it's the 9th expansion, I think. It's gonna be some bullshit about dragons. So.
Can you hide your fat belly?
I remember when it was like announced and then canceled and then redone and then rewritten and then recasted and then like several directors have gone through it. The fans were actually fairly happy, at least I was, that it was taking its sweet time.
Right.
Because that means that the studio wasn't rushing to like just get it out of the way.
Yeah, and this could be a Warcraft movie is the kind of thing that a studio might not have any respect for and just want to cash in on at the right time. Originally titled Warcraft The Beginning, apparently. Once again, it was obviously supposed to be a franchise builder. So this movie is directed by Duncan Jones, who at that time was, one of the most exciting new filmmakers coming along after doing Moon and then Source Code.
Right. For better or for worse, the Warcraft universe shaped my childhood and my teenage years. Have you played anything from the Warcraft universe?
When I was babysat as a boy by a guy named Bryn, he played Warcraft instead of doing anything with me, and he got paid for that. So nice one. That is the full extent of my Warcraft experience.
Okay. So yeah, that's what I was wondering, because the things that I like or dislike might be very different from yours, because I'm looking at it from a purely fan perspective. So
I did, when this movie came out, at that time I had I think what you like the stereotypical non-Warcraft player experience of this movie, where I just shut down 30 minutes in from too many names. And,
right.
I kind of just stopped paying attention and was just like, well, they're gonna fight eventually, so I'll just hang around for that. For whatever reason, this time I felt a little bit more engaged, and it was enough that without knowing anything, I felt like this seemed like a movie that actually had done a reasonably good job of balancing the for the fans thing with for the mainstream audiences thing. I respected that and was just happy with it, and I was fine not knowing some of the things. I felt like it still bothered to give me some stuff, and it seemed like it gave the fans a lot. So
how tricky it must have been.
Yeah.
If you over-explain, then you'll run into the issue that a lot of the bad movies, for example, like The Green Lantern with Ryan Reynolds, that one has, which is the first 4 minutes is just in the beginning when the universe was created, blah, 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 right? And then, okay, now you get all the non-fans caught up, but then they're already bored of their minds. And then the actual fans are even more bored because they already know all of these things.
Yeah.
But if you don't do any of that, people like yourself who don't know anything about the Warcraft universe would get confused. And probably at the time, a lot of people probably just shut down and stop caring because, everybody sounds the same, everybody kind of looks similar, and you have no idea who's who, and
And I had a little trouble with the orcs, for sure. I was not fully engaged with the plot at all times, I admit. Is there a better video game adaptation?
What do we consider good video game to movie adaptation? Is it how much it kept its original authenticity, how much it stays to source material, or is it the adaptation, which is interpretation of the source material, right? If you stick very true to the original material, your fans are going to be happy, but it might be kind of nonsense for the general audience. And I think that's probably best shown in the 2019 Mortal Kombat?
Yes.
Yeah, it had a lot of things directly from the game, and so does this movie, but for the general audience, it didn't really work.
Yeah, and that was kind of because when I think best video game adaptations, I think of old Mortal Kombat, 90s Mortal Kombat, and 90s Street Fighter. And those are both bad movies.
Yeah.
But I think of them because they're the most entertaining, but they're also ones that just slaughtered their source material.
And I will wear your tongue.
When Duncan Jones came in, he hated the script because the script was humans were the good guys and orcs were the bad guys.
Yeah.
And it was just sort of a straightforward save the kingdom type story.
One of the favorite things that I love about the Warcraft universe, and it's not original to Warcraft, a lot of other things have done this, but I really love the fact that the orcs and its allied other species are not just pure brutal monsters like in Tolkien or like in Warhammer.
Yeah.
In so many other portrayals, but they are just a civilization with its own cultures. Yeah, and I like how it's done, and I really like the fact that Duncan Jones didn't like the original version where the orcs were just brutal monsters. And it shows in this movie because it opens with the orcs. It opens with a couple in bed. How do you feel about the CG? Do you think it still holds up?
I was really back and forth because I was never able to settle into the sequences that had big groups of orcs, but I did find especially Durotan to be like one of the most like expressive and sympathetic characters in the movie. It just didn't carry over to when there were whole big groups of orcs for me.
My least favorite part about this movie are the humans.
Yeah.
In terms of visual design. Actually, there's a lot of things I don't like about the humans, but their visual design, I think the biggest flaw is that they all look the same. They look like game NPCs that's been cloned.
I really struggled with the casting choices, and not the casting of specific people so much as what you're talking about, which is just that overall the general look of people did not allow me to like sink into the movie. They were less engaging than the orcs. I guess basically is and that it shouldn't be the case. I had more or less as much trouble differentiating the human characters as I did the orc characters, and that seems like a weird scenario. So there's a king who's like the noblest king of all time, just like
King Lane,
good dude.
And
then there's the figure Lothar.
Yeah, Lothar.
If you were building a movie from scratch, you would never have these two characters because they're both like they both fulfill the same type of hero for me. They've made that even worse because they look like the same guy in the movie, which they didn't need to do.
The orcs were summoned. From this side of the gate, they were invited in.
I especially hated Khadgar the mage here with his like, pubescent look. And I think one of the biggest problems, it took me a while to come to this conclusion or to realize this, I think, is that the costumes of the humans are very cartoony and very exaggerated. And that's true to the game, and that's fine, right? But the problem is the acting clashes with it because the acting is very of its time, like the subdued, everybody's more mumbly and quiet and grim. And it doesn't work with the visual style. If anything, a little bit of like Tim Burton Batman would have fit better, I think. Yeah. That kind of like slightly over the top would have worked better with the style.
I totally agree with you. It felt like everyone was being really careful to not be campy, and it just ended up with everyone being like flat and serious all the time.
Yeah. Travis Fimmel, is that how you say his last name?
Couldn't tell you.
Ragnar Lothbrok, there you go, from Vikings. His acting is the most mumbly and subdued of all, but then half the time he is in like basically just a brown shirt.
Yeah.
And it works better.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't clash, it fits him. As soon as he put on the shiny chromatic gold armor and he still has that subdued mumbly acting, it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
Was it clear for you on how Medivh, the most powerful mage played by Ben Foster, who definitely does not give the vibe of the most powerful mage in the world? Was it clear for you on how he's part of that story and how he's...
No. It maybe could have been clear. I maybe could have listened. Honestly, early on, they like hint. They're like, "Oh, someone helped them open it from this side," and I was like, "Well, obviously it's fucking Ben Foster. Who else?"
He is not suitable to play Medivh.
He's just a very little man, right? Like he has,
it doesn't
he has
work.
a little head and a little. Have you seen John Borman's Excalibur, the one from like 1980 or so? Merlin in that is like, in my opinion, one of the all-time great depictions of what a wizard or a mage might be like. And and that's mainly because he comes across as fairly insane. You understand he knows about so many more things than you that you can't even really access like his perspective or his way of seeing the world. But Ben Foster could just not feel like that for me. He just felt like a guy in a cloak who had some lightning eyes.
I feel like Ben Foster was just basically a cosplayer who wandered on set and they let him stay.
Right.
You are the son of Duratan and Draka, an unbroken line of chieftains.
This is another case of the movie putting the cart before the horse. It's trying to make a movie with sequels already in mind, so then it results in a movie that doesn't stand on its own.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that they still did this in 2016 because, like...
They didn't learn from Van Helsing?
Yeah. The most successful cinematic universe is the Marvel one. And if you look at the first Iron Man, it works well and it works as a standalone movie.
Yeah, it's just a movie
if there
about...
were no more MCU after. Yeah.
He builds a suit. That's like the entire thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a simple little movie with a really appealing central character.
Yeah, and they either should have done that or they should have done what Lord of the Rings did, which is film 3 movies at once.
Yeah.
They did a movie that basically just established things to be paid off in future films that they hope will happen.
Yeah. Well, I really think you're right, because to be honest, during the first half or so of watching this movie, while it had its ups and downs, I was like, this is pretty good. I'm enjoying where all of this is heading. Mm-hmm. And then in the second half, I found that the climax did not lead smoothly from like the plot lines that had been set up, and also didn't give me a feeling of like having watched a full movie. Yeah, you're totally right about the setup thing. Like I just had this feeling like if you sat and watched the end of Revenge of the Sith, where it sets up like all everything that's going to happen in A New Hope, but if you hadn't seen any Star Wars and you were just watching like, now there's the reveal of 2 moons and now there's the reveal of Darth Vader, and I would be like, what is this? I don't know what any of this. So I totally can believe that how it was supposed to feel was like all these things like falling into place in the end. But as a non-fan, that's definitely where I was hurting the most was as each plot line was concluded, I was like, well, what did that mean then?
I wonder how it would have been if this movie was focused solely on the orc side and the humans are portrayed as the bad guys.
I think that would have been more interesting.
And then you have a second film where it focuses on just the human side, and it's the same event but from the other point of view.
So what they needed was Clint Eastwood, fresh from the Iwo movies, because he did that.
Okay, fair enough.
He did that with historical events.
You shamed your people by running from an enemy.
As kind of just an old fuddy-duddy, I just wrote down like I couldn't help feeling like I was watching cutscenes some of the time, and it was this stuff with a bunch of orcs standing around a bunch of green CG. It looks fantastic. It's very impressive visual effects work, but it's all visual effects. This is a very specific example, but when this guy, who's it? Gul'dan?
Gul'dan, yeah.
When Gul'dan walks forward here, the camera like trucks backward with him. Unlike it would with a real human, it's kind of like locked into his body size so that it moves in perfect synchronicity. And I know that that's not what they would have shot if they were shooting a human. He would have either walked into a closer frame or they wouldn't have been able to maintain that smooth motion. It looks unnatural. But the more the movie went on, the bigger and bigger the groups of orcs got until finally we're just like at a battle that's like full on. That made me feel kind of like Ready Player One made me feel, where it was just like a mass of CG.
And it's kind of funny because on those close-up personal moments with the orcs, it feels like the cinematic cutscenes of a strategy game. Yes. And then at these wide shots, it feels like playing a strategy game where you're like, that cool cinematic did not get portrayed well.
Yes. Yeah, that's funny.
Which reminds me, if you're interested in listening to the full-length discussion of this episode, you can find it on our Patreon. The link is on screen and in the description down below. If you go over there, you will get the entire recording in an audio format like a podcast. Check it out. Support us. Help us keep doing this. We really appreciate it. Anyways,
I don't think the movie needed this big-ass army to army sequence in this movie. It didn't work. It felt like it needed it because Lord of the Rings did it, and that was it. But Lord of the Rings' big battle was justified.
Yeah, that's what the whole story was headed for, whereas that's not necessarily true in this one. I mean, one of the things that I had written down that I liked about this movie was actually how much the heroes are engaged in diplomacy, of all things. A lot of it is a movie about people like trying to find a good way to get along and not have to go to war.
The first Lord of the Ring movie, Fellowship of the Ring, the biggest battle is the opening, is in the sort of lore establishment. You see scenes of it, of
True.
Showing how Sauron was, Sauron invading Middle Earth and blah, blah, blah. The climatic fight in Fellowship wasn't a big ass battle. It was like 4 people against a horde.
It's true. Yeah, it's closer to the skirmish we're talking about from the start of this movie.
Yeah, we're gonna try a little thing. We're gonna do a thing called I don't know. We don't have a name for it yet, so let's just call it what we would do that's better than what the movie did.
That's perfect, catchy.
I think the biggest issue obviously is the humans. I think they're just all poorly casted for their roles. And I spent a long time thinking about who I would have casted for the roles. First and foremost, King Lane. I think I would have casted Ian Glenn, if you remember him from Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As Ser Jorah Mormont. I think he suits the sort of grizzled old king better. In the later scenes when he puts on that ridiculous armor, it probably would have worked better.
I think I'm with you. Dominic Cooper does not have a kingly
No, he's too mousy.
presence. Yeah.
Well, actually, you know what? Even worse than the king is Medivh, obviously. Ben Foster just does not work at all in this movie. And I think if it was me, I would have casted Stellan Skarsgård.
That would work for me for sure.
I mean, the man can play, I think, pretty much anything, but he suits better. He has that voice. He has that. I will listen to him, anything he tells me to do, because he just has that presence.
Kings and mages are like scary to be around because there's so much power in this person, and neither of them like embodied that well. And so I think something that makes so much sense about your casting ideas is they are people just standing in a room with them. You would feel the power and the presence and the charisma.
My last one is this guy, Khadgar.
Yeah.
Played by, what is it, Schnetz something? I can't remember his name.
I don't know who this guy is.
Ben Schnedden or something like that. I can't remember his name. You know who I would have loved seeing as this role? James McAvoy.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, I think
someone
with
a bit more
really
like
well.
with a bit more like scheming. Not just like so open and naive. So your overall, I feel like your overall note from your casting is that you wanted more edge in these people. Like in each case, you moved them towards like a kind of like tougher and more angular and less trustworthy and more capable of violence. Like kind of feeling.
I think if I wasn't a Warcraft fan and I know nothing about it and I watched this movie, I would have seen the characters, like the human character actors.
Yeah.
And I would have gone, there's no way they could stood up against the orcs.
Yeah.
It's like watching a child fight adults.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the vibe I got. When the movie starts and you see one human face off against one orc, I was like, oh man, the humans are fucked. This is not a reasonable showdown. Did you like the movie?
I think I got the same amount of enjoyment as I would have gotten if I were to watch every cinematic cutscene stitched together on YouTube. That's basically what it felt like. And
which you have done?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. How did you feel about this movie?
In the end,
it's not good.
Yeah, like I was bored for large sections. So I don't know how much credit I can give it when the first thing that comes to mind is me being bored. But I actually think it was incredibly ambitious as a video game adaptation. I don't think, even the other ones that we've mentioned as being good, I don't think tried to do nearly as much with the idea of a video game adaptation as this one did.
Interesting bit of trivia for you. Director Uwe Boll contacted Blizzard wanting to direct this movie.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And Blizzard refused. Paul Sams of Blizzard at the time, he said, and I quote, "We will not sell the movie rights, not to you, especially not to you." Okay, anyways, that wraps it up for our episode on Warcraft the movie. Yeah, hopefully there's a bunch of either happy or very disgruntled World of Warcraft fans finding this video after April 19th. We'll see how it goes with that announcement. Next week, we are going back to the year 2000 with Charlie's Angels.
Yay!
yeah, stay tuned for that one. Come check it out next week. Charlie's Angels. We're done. And press like and subscribe and all that bullshit. Jesus Christ, you think I know this by now?
Poor Azeroth.